I returned to Cincinnati after 6 months of silence, craving sleep, but my key refused to turn. Inside, I heard my sister laughing about spending my savings while my father agreed. They were waiting for my rage, the explosion they could manipulate. Instead, I gave them absolute calm. Anger makes noise, but silence is a trap. And by the time they realize I am not shouting, the steel jaws will have already snapped shut around their lives. My name is Riley Hall, and for the last 6 months, I have been a ghost. I existed only in sleek conference rooms in Seattle and encrypted emails, working on a merger that was too fragile to breathe on, let alone speak about. When the deal finally closed, or at least reached the point where my physical presence was no longer a liability, I did not buy champagne. I did not call anyone. I simply drove to the airport, flew 4 hours back to Cincinnati, and got into my car. All I wanted was the specific silence of my own condo, the smell of my own sheets, and perhaps 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep. It was 11 at night when I finally stood in front of Unit 4B. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, a familiar scent that usually signaled safety. I dropped my heavy leather weekender bag on the floor, the sound a dull thud in the quiet corridor. I fished my keys from the bottom of my purse, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. Already anticipating the click of the deadbolt, I slid the key in. It stopped halfway. I frowned, jiggling it slightly. Maybe the humidity had warped the doorframe again. I tried to push it in, but metal hit metal with a solid, unforgiving resistance. I pulled the key out and looked at the lock. My breath hitched. This was not my lock. My old lock was a standard, scratched brass deadbolt I had installed 5 years ago. This thing staring back at me was a matte black smart lock, the kind with a keypad and a fingerprint scanner. It was sleek, modern, expensive, and completely alien. For a moment, I thought I was on the wrong floor. I stepped back, checking the number, 4B. This was my home. This was the condo I had bought with my first major bonus, the one place that was entirely mine. Riley? The voice made me jump. I turned to see Mrs. Gable from across the hall peering out through her chain lock. She looked confused, clutching her robe at her throat. "Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. My key isn't working." "Oh," she said, her eyes darting to the new black lock and then back to me. "I thought Tessa said you knew." "Tessa?" The name hung in the air like smoke. "My sister." "She's been here for weeks, dear," Mrs. Gable said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "She said you were away on business indefinitely and asked her to watch the place. She's been signing for your packages. Very polite girl. She even brought me cookies last Tuesday." My stomach turned over. A cold, hard knot forming right beneath my ribs. Tessa, my sister, who claimed she couldn't figure out online banking without my help, had installed a high-tech security lock on my door. "Right," I managed to say, forcing a tight smile. "I must have forgotten she changed the hardware. Jet lag. Go back to sleep. Mrs. Gable?" She hesitated, then nodded and closed her door. I stood alone in the hallway, but the exhaustion was gone, replaced by a sharp, vibrating alertness. I did not pound on the door. I did not ring the doorbell. Instead, I took a step back and looked up. The security camera I had installed above the doorframe, a small, discreet lens, had been twisted. It was now pointing uselessly at the blank wall to the left. I looked down at the mail slot. The small label that had read R, Hall in my typed font, was gone. In its place was a handwritten label. The Halls, plural. A low murmur of voices drifted through the door. The insulation in this building was good, but if you stood close enough to the seam, you could hear. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the cold wood. "It is handled. Just relax," a woman's voice said. Tessa. Her tone was not the frantic, needy whine she usually used with me. It was confident, smug. "I spoke to the broker today. The withdrawal is pending. We just need to get the signature on the authorization form, and the liquidity is ours." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Withdrawal, liquidity, those were my words, my world, not hers. Tessa thought liquidity was having enough cash for a brunch tab. Are you sure she won't see the notification? A male voice, deep, gravelly, and terrifyingly familiar. I froze. That was not a boyfriend. That was our father, Gordon Hall. She is in Seattle, Dad, Tessa laughed, the sound bright and sharp. She is buried in that tech deal. She hasn't checked her personal email in months. By the time she surfaces, we will have the paper trail to show it was a family investment. She will sign. You know Riley. She hates conflict. She will sign just to make the awkwardness go away. I don't like it, Gordon grumbled, though I could hear the sound of ice clinking against glass. He was drinking my scotch. But the studio needs the capital. If she was a better daughter, she would have offered it herself. If she was a better daughter. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had paid his medical bills. I had paid off Tessa's credit cards 3 times. I was the safety net. The fixer. The one they called when the roof leaked or the car broke down. And here they were, standing in my living room, drinking my liquor, discussing how to strip me for parts. I needed to see. I crouched down. The new lock was high-tech, but the door itself was old, and there was a hairline gap between the door and the frame near the bottom hinge where the wood had warped. It was a sliver of a view, but it was enough. I saw the corner of my living room. My gray velvet sofa was pushed against the wall, covered in plastic. But what stopped my heart was the stack of cardboard boxes near the entryway. They were labeled in Tessa's looping handwriting. Donate. I saw the corner of my bookshelf. It was empty, the small fireproof safe I kept bolted to the floor of the closet, the one containing my birth certificate, the deed to the rental property, and my private ledgers, was sitting on the coffee table. It had been pried open. They hadn't just moved in. They were erasing me. They were liquidating my existence to fund whatever fantasy Tessa was currently chasing. A surge of hot, violent anger rose in my throat. I wanted to kick the door down. I wanted to scream until the police came. I wanted to grab the scotch glass from my father's hand and smash it against the wall. But then I remembered the conversation I had just heard. She hates conflict. She will sign just to make the awkwardness go away. They were counting on my emotional reaction. They were betting on the fact that I would cry, scream, and then ultimately capitulate because I valued family peace over my own dignity. If I barged in there now, shouting and crying, I would be playing the exact role they had written for me, the hysterical, unreasonable daughter, the instability. I took a deep breath. Counting to 4, I exhaled. I picked up my bag. I did not make a sound. I turned and walked back down the hallway, stepping carefully on the edges of the carpet to avoid the creaky floorboards. I took the elevator down to the garage. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat in the dark. My hands were trembling, but my mind was crystal clear. I pulled out my phone. I logged into my bank app. Access denied. Too many failed attempts. I opened my email. I searched for address change. There it was, a confirmation email from the bank, dated 3 weeks ago. Your request to change your mailing address to Post Office Box 419 has been processed. They had moved the goalposts while I was not even on the field. I looked up at the window of my condo on the 4th floor. The light was warm and inviting. My family was up there, warm and fed, planning how to spend the money I had spent 10 years earning. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over because they held the keys. They forgot that I was the one who bought the house. I opened my messages. I typed in the group chat named Family. I typed, I am back. I will stop by tomorrow. I looked at the message. It was short, soft. It gave nothing away. It sounded like the dutiful daughter coming home to share a meal. It sounded like a sheep walking willingly to the slaughter. I hit send. Let them sleep well tonight. Let them think they are safe. Because tomorrow, I would not bring them anger. I would bring them consequences. I checked into a generic hotel downtown, the kind where the carpet patterns are designed to hide stains and the air conditioning units hum with a rattle that sounds like a dying engine. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. my phone dark in my hand. I should have been furious. I should have been driving back to the condo to kick the door down. But the rage had settled into something colder, something heavy and solid in my gut. It felt like grief. I closed my eyes and the timeline of how we got here began to unspool. Not in days or weeks, but in years of small, quiet surrenders. I had always been the fixer. In the Hall family ecosystem, roles were assigned at birth and enforced with rigid discipline. Tessa was the sun, bright and blinding, demanding gravity. She was beautiful, chaotic, and perpetually unlucky in ways that required immediate financial intervention. I was the shadow. I was the one who understood compound interest and the fine print on insurance policies. I remembered a Tuesday 4 years ago. Tessa had maxed out 3 credit cards, trying to launch a boutique jewelry line that consisted mostly of reselling cheap imports. The debt collectors had started calling the house line. Gordon, my father, had sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, performing his favorite role, the weary patriarch, burdening under the weight of the world. "We just need a fresh start," he had said, looking not at Tessa, but at me. "Riley, you have that bonus coming in. Family helps family." I had written the check. $12,400. I paid it off in silence, and that evening, they ordered takeout to celebrate. I was not invited to eat. I was in my room, balancing my own budget to make up for the hole I had just dug for them. That was the pattern. Tessa created the mess. Gordon rationalized the mess, and I cleaned up the mess. They loved the clean slate, but they resented the janitor. This time, however, the stakes were different. 6 months ago, I had helped co-found a compliance software company called Sentinel Verify. We were a boring, unsexy company that solved a very expensive problem for banks. We were in the final stages of being acquired by a major tech conglomerate. The deal was valued in the mid-8 figures. It was the kind of money that changes bloodlines, but it was also fragile. The due diligence phase was brutal. Any hint of financial instability, any leak of information, could have spooked the buyers. I had to go to Seattle to oversee the final audit personally. I could not tell my family why. If Gordon knew I was on the verge of a windfall, he would have spent the money before the ink was dry. If Tessa knew, she would have posted about it on social media within the hour. So I told them I was going on a long-term consulting gig. Boring, standard. "I need someone to watch the mail," I had said to Tessa the day before I left. "Just the utility bills and the property tax notices. I don't want anything slipping through the cracks while I'm gone." Tessa had widened her eyes, giving me that look of helpless charm she had perfected in high school. "You know I am terrible with deadlines. What if I forget? What if the power gets cut off and the pipes burst? Just sign a limited power of attorney, just for household management. That way, if something comes up, I can handle it without bothering you in Seattle." It sounded reasonable. That was the most dangerous thing about my family. They weaponized reason. I was tired, focused on the merger, and desperate to leave without a fight. I drafted the document myself. It was narrow. It explicitly stated the authority was for mail retrieval, utility maintenance, and minor household upkeep. It was never meant to authorize a home equity line of credit. It was never meant to authorize changing the locks. But a piece of paper is like a knife. It depends entirely on whose hand is holding it. Gordon had driven me to the airport. "I just want you two to get along," he had said as I unloaded my luggage. "Trust her. Riley, she is trying to step up. Stop being so independent. It makes you cold." Cold. That was his word for me. He hated that I didn't need him. He hated that I had bought my condo without his co-signature. He hated that when he offered advice on my career, I politely declined it because his advice was usually 20 years out of date, to Gordon Hall. Love was control. Since he couldn't control me, he decided I was broken. I lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the textured ceiling. I reached into my bag and pulled out the one thing I never traveled without, a worn leather journal. It didn't belong to me originally. It had belonged to Aunt June. June was my mother's sister, the black sheep who had been ostracized for refusing to lend Gordon money for one of his guaranteed investment schemes back in the 90s. She died 3 years ago. She left me her vintage car and a small savings account, but the real inheritance was her perspective. They will eat you alive if you let them. Riley, she had told me from her hospital bed, her voice thin but her eyes sharp as glass. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a resource, like a vein of coal. They will mine you until the shaft collapses, and then they will blame you for the dust. She had grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Keep your receipts, and keep your calm. Anger is a gift they don't deserve. Silence is the only thing that scares a narcissist. I had thought she was being dramatic. I had thought, they are my family, they are messy, but they aren't malicious. I was wrong. Aunt June was right. The pain hit me then, a sharp, physical ache in my chest. It wasn't about the money. I could make more money. It wasn't about the condo. It was about the erasure. Standing outside that door tonight, listening to them, I realized they didn't miss me. They didn't wonder how I was doing in Seattle. They didn't care if I was lonely or tired. To them, I was just an obstacle to the assets I had accumulated. I was the one who is away. I was a signature they needed to forge. I was a bank account that had inconveniently developed a personality. They had turned my generosity into a weapon. They had used my desire for peace to prepare for war. I sat up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Cincinnati. The clock on the bedside table read 2 a.m. Tessa and Gordon were probably asleep now, dreaming of the money they thought they had secured. They expected me to come back and scream. They expected the Riley of 5 years ago, the one who cried when they forgot her birthday, the one who pleaded for their approval. They had prepared a script for that Riley. They had their excuses ready. We did it for your own good, or we thought you weren't coming back, or the classic, you have so much. Why are you so greedy? If I gave them anger, I gave them a villain. I would become the hysterical, ungrateful daughter attacking her struggling sister and aging father. So I would not give them that. I went to the desk in the corner of the room and opened my laptop. I didn't log into my bank. I knew what I would find there. Instead, I opened a new document. I typed a header, Asset Recovery and Liability Timeline. I wasn't a daughter anymore. Not tonight. Tonight, I was the co-founder of Sentinel Verify. I was a woman who closed multi-million-dollar deals with hostile corporate boards. I was going to treat my family exactly like what they had become. A hostile acquisition attempt. They wanted to play with paperwork? Fine. I would bury them in it. I typed the first entry. Date of departure, August 15th, 2025. I typed the second entry. Scope of power of attorney, limited to maintenance. Violation confirmed. I looked at the cursor blinking on the white screen. It was a steady, rhythmic pulse. It looked like a heartbeat. You want the money? I whispered to the empty room. I will show you the cost. I closed the laptop. The darkness of the room felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. I would go there tomorrow. I would smile. I would be soft. And I would begin the process of taking back my life. One signature at a time. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the hotel room. It was 3 a.m. Most people would be pacing the floor or crying into a pillow. But I was doing what I did best. I was auditing the damage. I logged into the credit monitoring service I paid for but rarely checked. The dashboard loaded, and the first thing I saw was a red arrow pointing down. My score, usually a pristine 820, had dropped by 40 points in the last month. I clicked on the Recent Activity tab. The list populated, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a hard inquiry from a credit card company I did not bank with. Approved. Limit, $15,000. There was a personal loan application pending with a peer-to-peer lender. Amount, $10,000. But the third item made my blood run cold. It was a notification for a new home equity line of credit, or HELOC, for $150,000. I stared at the screen. A HELOC requires collateral. You cannot take equity out of a condo you do not fully own, and my condo still had a small mortgage balance. I clicked the details. The address listed for the collateral was not my condo in the city. It was 1014 Maplewood Drive. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Maplewood was a small, 3-bedroom house in the suburbs I had bought 5 years ago as a rental property. It was my secret retirement plan. My true safety net. I had never told Gordon or Tessa about it, because I knew they would see it as a reservoir of cash they could tap into. The deed was in a fireproof safe in my closet. The same safe I had seen sitting on my coffee table hours earlier, pried open like a clam. They hadn't just changed the locks. They had raided my financial skeleton. I picked up my phone. I did not dial my father. I dialed the 24-hour fraud department of the bank servicing the HELOC. "This is Riley Hall," I said when the agent picked up. My voice was flat, stripped of all inflection. "I am looking at a line of credit opened in my name. I need you to tell me the IP address and the device used to sign the electronic disclosures." The agent hesitated. "Ma'am, for security reasons, I am the account holder," I cut in. "I can answer your security questions. Mother's maiden name is Vance. First pet was a retriever named Buster. The last 4 digits of my social are 9921. Now, tell me the device." There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. "It looks like the initial application and the digital signature were logged from an iPhone 15 Pro, utilizing a Wi-Fi network in Cincinnati." I closed my eyes. I used an Android. Tessa was the one who upgraded her iPhone every September like it was a religious holiday. "And the disbursement?" I asked. "Where was the money sent?" "The funds are currently in a holding account pending final notarized signature on the primary deed of trust," the agent said. "We sent the physical paperwork to the address on file last week." "Which address?" "Post Office Box 419. I thanked him and hung up. They didn't have the money yet. They were close. Dangerously close. But they were waiting on a physical piece of paper. That explained the urgency in Tessa's voice I had heard through the door. "We just need the signature for it to be legal." I opened a new tab and navigated to the United States Postal Service portal. I scrutinized the change of address request scan that was available in my history. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The signature read Riley Hall, but the loop on the R was too wide, too flamboyant. It was a performance of my signature, not the reality of it. Then I saw it. In the comment section of the form, where the applicant had to list reason for move, the handwriting said, "Temporary relocation for business." Business, spelled Business. Tessa had been trying to launch her own business for a decade, and for a decade, she had spelled it exactly that way on every failed business card and grant application I had proofread for her. It was a fingerprint made of ink. I took a screenshot. Next, I opened my personal email. I went to the trash folder. If they had access to my devices or my passwords, they would have been deleting notifications to keep me in the dark. I found it. An email from Citywide Moving and Storage, dated 10 days ago. Subject: Invoice for services, rendered at Unit 4B. I opened the attachment. It wasn't just a moving receipt, it was an inventory list. Tessa hadn't just moved my furniture to make space for her design studio aesthetic. She had put my life into boxes and shipped them to a storage facility on the other side of town. I scanned the itemized list: sofa, dining table, bed frame, and then, near the bottom, one banker's box, labeled Sentinel/Merger Docs. My stomach dropped. That box contained the physical hard copies of the vesting schedules and the original founder's agreement for Sentinel Verify, while everything was digitized. The buyers for the acquisition had demanded the original wet ink documents be produced at closing next week to verify the chain of title. If I couldn't produce that box, the compliance team would flag the deal. The merger could stall. The buyers could walk. This wasn't just theft. This was sabotage. I realized then that Tessa and Gordon didn't know what was in that box. To them, it was just boring paper. But by moving it, by taking it out of my possession, they had accidentally placed a bomb under the foundation of my entire career. I opened the spreadsheet I had started earlier. I began to construct a timeline, cross-referencing the dates from the bank, the postal service, and the moving company. August 15th. I depart for Seattle. August 22nd. Tessa logs into my email from her phone. September 1st. The change of address form is filed. September 10th. The lock is changed. September 15th. The HELOC application is submitted using the deed stolen from my safe. September 20th. The storage and moving invoice is generated. It was a systematic dismantling of my life. They had waited until I was gone long enough to be comfortable. Then they struck. I sat back, looking at the data. It was a perfect trap, but it had one flaw. They were arrogant. They assumed I would come home, see the lock, and dissolve into tears. They assumed I would be so desperate to get back into my home and so hurt by their betrayal that I would sign whatever they put in front of me just to make the pain stop. They needed my signature to legalize the loan on the rental property. They needed me to validate the identity fraud so the bank wouldn't investigate the IP mismatch. They were waiting for a victim. I saved the file. I named it evidence_package_1. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hotel room. I looked tired. My hair was messy. My eyes rimmed with red. I looked exactly like the Riley they expected. Weak, overwhelmed, defeated. Perfect, I said to my reflection. I would go to them tomorrow. I would play the part. I would let them think they had cornered me. I would let Tessa smile her smug smile and let Gordon lecture me about family unity. And while they were busy congratulating themselves, I would hand them the pen. I wouldn't be signing away my rights. I would be collecting their autographs on their own confessions. They wanted a signature? I would give them one. But first, I had to make sure the ink they used was indelible. I picked up my phone and sent a message to the one person in this city who hated financial fraud more than I did. Jade Monroe, the toughest litigator in Ohio. I need an appointment at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I typed, I have a fraud case. The perpetrators are my father and sister. And I have the timeline. I hit send. The game had changed. They were playing checkers with my furniture. I was about to play chess with their freedom. Jade Monroe's office smelled of expensive espresso and cold ambition. It was situated on the 35th floor of a glass tower that looked down on the city like a judge on a bench. Jade herself was a study in sharp angles, razor-cut bob, tailored suit, and eyes that dissected information without a hint of emotion. She was the best financial fraud litigator in Cincinnati because she did not care about feelings. She cared about leverage. She slid the printouts of my credit report and the moving invoice across her mahogany desk. This is not a family dispute. Riley, Jade said, her voice dry. This is grand larceny, identity theft, wire fraud, and since they use the postal service to facilitate the address change, we can throw in mail fraud too. I could have your father and sister in handcuffs by lunch. I do not want them arrested, I said, staring at the stack of papers. Not yet. Jade raised an eyebrow. Why? Sentimentality is expensive. Because if I arrest them now, it becomes a mess. I explained. They will cry to the press. They will claim it was a misunderstanding. My father will play the senile old man card. And most importantly, the scandal could spook the buyers for Sentinel Verify. We are days away from closing. I need this to go away quietly. But I need it to be permanent. Jade leaned back, tapping a silver pen against her chin. So you want a clean break. You want to cauterize the wound. I want them to admit it, I said. And I want to ensure they can never come back for more when the merger money hits my account. Jade smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. If your sister wants to legitimize her theft, let us give her a package that looks like it legitimizes it. We will not sue. We will settle. We spent the next 2 hours drafting the trap. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection, a document composed of 3 distinct layers designed to play directly into Tessa and Gordon's psychology. The first layer was the bait, a document titled Family Settlement and Asset Reconciliation Agreement. The title sounded soft, forgiving. It sounded like something a mediator would suggest to keep the peace. It acknowledged the HELOC and the unauthorized transfers, but framed them as advances on future inheritance rather than theft. It was designed to make them feel safe, to make them think I was accepting their narrative. The second layer was the distraction, a repayment plan. We structured it to be laughably lenient, $200 a month over 30 years. It was a number so low it was insulting to me, but Jade insisted on it. "They will focus entirely on this number," Jade said, pointing to the figure. "Your sister is broke. She needs that design studio lease, but she cannot sign it while her credit is flagged for fraud. She needs this reconciliation to show the landlord that her funds are clean. When she sees she only has to pay $200 a month to keep the $150,000 she stole, she will think she won the lottery. She will be so busy gloating about the low payment that she will not read the rest." And that was where the third layer lived, the kill switch. Buried in Section 14, Paragraph 3, was a general release and waiver of future claims. It was dense legalese, but its function was absolute. By signing the agreement, Tessa and Gordon would be waiving any and all future claims to my assets, my estate, or my income. It explicitly severed them from any beneficiary status in my life. It meant that when the Sentinel Verified deal closed next week and my net worth skyrocketed, they could not ask for a single penny. They were trading a fortune they did not know about for the scraps they had already stolen. "It is a guillotine inside a bouquet of flowers," Jade said, printing the final draft. "But you need them to sign it willingly, and you need it notarized." "I can get them to sign," I said, taking the warm pages. "Tessa is desperate. Her studio opening is next week. She cannot move forward if I keep the accounts frozen." I left Jade's office and sat in my car. I took out my phone. My hands were steady. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching a movie of my own life. I typed a message to Tessa. "I saw the house. I saw the lock. I am not going to call the police. I just want my life back. If you want to keep the money you took for the studio, we need to do paperwork to clear the fraud alert so the bank doesn't prosecute. Help me clean up the papers and we can move on." I tapped send. The response came in less than 30 seconds. "Oh, thank God. I knew you would understand. Dad was so worried you would overreact. We really just borrowed it to get the business going for the family. We can totally fix the paperwork." "When?" She was so eager. She sounded like the victim who had been graciously forgiven. She had no idea she was running toward a cliff. "Saturday, Dad's house, 2 o'clock. I typed back, "Perfect. I will bring wine." "Love you," she replied. I stared at the screen. "Love you." She had stolen my identity, pawned my future, and evicted me from my own home. And she ended the text with "love you." It was the ultimate gaslight. I drove to a copy center 2 blocks away. I made 3 copies of the entire agreement. Then, I drove to a mobile notary service. I paid the notary $50 to certify my copies of the original evidence, the bank logs, the IP address records, the moving invoice, so that I had authenticated duplicates. Jade had warned me. They will try to destroy the originals once they realize what is happening. Or they will claim they never saw them. Make sure you have copies that stand up in court. I sat in the parking lot, organizing the files into color-coded folders. Blue for the evidence, red for the trap. Tessa needed that studio. It was her vanity project, her bid for validation. She had already bragged about it on social media. If the financing fell through now because of a fraud investigation, she would be humiliated. She would do anything to make the red flags on her credit report go away. She would sign her soul away to avoid embarrassment. I looked at the red folder. "You want to be a business owner, Tessa," I whispered. "Then let's do business." I started the engine. The meeting was set. The pieces were on the board. They thought they were inviting their pushover sister to a scolding. They did not know they were walking into a deposition. I parked my rental car in the driveway of the house I grew up in. It was a sprawling, 2-story brick colonial that my father, Gordon, liked to call the estate, though it was really just a house with a high maintenance bill. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. I had skipped concealer to let the dark circles under my eyes stand out. I wore a slightly wrinkled cardigan and jeans that were a size too big. I looked diminished. I looked like a woman who had been defeated by the world and was crawling back to the safety of the nest. It was exactly the costume the scene required. When I walked through the front door, the air smelled of potpourri and expensive red wine. Tessa was sitting on the living room sofa, her legs tucked under her, holding a crystal glass. She looked radiant, practically glowing with the adrenaline of what she thought was a victory. Gordon was in his leather armchair, the same one he used to sit in when he lectured me about my grades or my tone of voice. "There she is," Tessa cooed, standing up to offer me a hug that felt more like a frisking. "Oh, Riley, you look terrible. Have you been eating? Seattle must have been brutal." I let her hug me. I let my arms hang limp at my sides. "It was a lot," I said, keeping my voice thin and breathy. "I am just glad to be home." "Well, about that," Gordon said, clearing his throat. He didn't stand up. "We need to talk about the house, Riley." Tessa had to step in. "You were gone. We didn't know when you were coming back. And frankly, leaving a property empty is irresponsible. Your sister did you a favor by managing it." "I know," I said, sitting on the edge of the ottoman, keeping my posture slumped. "I know you were just trying to help." Tessa exchanged a look with Gordon. A quick, triumphant glance. They had expected me to yell. My submission confused them, but it also relaxed them. They thought they had already won the psychological war. "I just felt like the condo was going to waste," Tessa said, swirling her wine. "And with my design studio opening, I needed liquidity to show the investors. I figured since you have that big corporate job, you wouldn't mind helping your baby sister get a start. It is an investment, really. Family investing in family." "I understand," I said. I reached into my tote bag. "I am not here to argue, Dad. I just want everything to be clear so I can sleep at night. The bank has been calling me about fraud alerts, and it is making me anxious. I just want to sign the papers and make the alert stop." I pulled out the folder. I didn't bring Jade. Bringing a lawyer would have signaled a fight. Bringing a stack of papers and a tired expression signaled surrender. "What is this?" Tessa asked, eyeing the document. "It is a reconciliation agreement," I lied smoothly. "I drafted it based on what the bank told me. Basically, it says that the money you took, the $150,000, is a loan, not a theft. If we sign this, the bank closes the fraud investigation." Tessa snatched the papers. Her eyes darted across the pages, looking for dollar signs. She found the repayment schedule on page 4. $200 a month? She asked, looking up at me, her eyebrows raised. "You are okay with $200 a month?" "It is all I need right now," I said. "I just want the account balanced." She practically laughed. In her mind, she had just negotiated a 6-figure windfall down to the price of a gym membership. She didn't read the rest. She didn't see the clause on page 7 where she waived all future rights to my estate. She didn't see the admission of liability in the preamble. She was too busy calculating how much designer furniture she could buy with the money she wasn't paying back. "See?" Gordon said, nodding sagely. "I told you Riley would be reasonable. This is how adults handle things. No police, no drama, just paper." "There is one more thing," I said, pulling out a separate sheet. This was the trap within the trap. "The bank needs to know exactly who authorized the digital changes so they don't flag my IP address again. I need you to sign this statement confirming that you, Tessa Hall, performed the login on September 15th and initiated the address change." Tessa waved her hand dismissively. "Sure, whatever. Pass me a pen." "Wait," I said, pulling the paper back slightly. "It has to be official. The bank is really strict about identity verification now." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Tessa huffed. She pulled out her phone and tapped a few buttons. I actually called a mobile notary service on my way over. I needed some lease documents notarized for the landlord anyway, so I told him to meet me here. He should be outside. I almost smiled. I had planned to suggest a notary, but she had done the work for me. She was so eager to legitimize her theft that she had ordered her own executioner. "That is perfect," I said softly. 2 minutes later, A heavy-set man named Mr. Henderson walked in with a stamp kit and a logbook. The atmosphere in the room shifted from a family chat to a legal proceeding. But only I seemed to notice the weight of it. Tessa signed the family settlement and asset reconciliation agreement with a flourish. She signed the statement of digital actions without even reading the paragraph above the signature line. The paragraph that explicitly confessed to accessing a federally insured account without the primary holder's consent. "And you, sir?" "Mr. Henderson asked Gordon, "are you witnessing these signatures?" "I am," Gordon said, puffing out his chest. "I am vouching for this agreement," he signed. He put his name next to hers, binding himself to the conspiracy. He thought he was witnessing a peace treaty. In reality, he was signing a witness statement that corroborated Tessa's confession. "We should do 2 originals," I suggested, my voice level. "One for you to keep for your landlord, and one for me to send to the bank." "Smart," Tessa said. "Let's get it done." "Mr. Henderson stamped both copies. The sound of the heavy rubber stamp hitting the paper was loud in the quiet room. Thud, thud. It sounded like a gavel. It sounded like a cell door slamming shut. I took my copy and slid it into my bag. Tessa held hers up like a trophy. "See?" she said, beaming at me. "Was that so hard? Now I can open the studio. You go back to your job, and everyone is happy." "Yes," I said, standing up. My legs felt steady now. The exhaustion I had feigned was evaporating, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. Everyone has what they deserve. "You are staying for dinner, right?" Gordon asked. But he was already looking at the TV, reaching for the remote. "No," I said. "I have a lot of work to do." "But thank you. Dad, thank you for making sure we got this signed." "You are welcome, honey," he said absently. "Just remember, family comes first." I walked out the door. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the driveway. I got into my car and locked the door. I looked at the folder on the passenger seat. They thought they had just swindled me. They thought they had bullied me into a corner and forced me to accept a pittance. But inside that folder was a notarized confession of felony wire fraud and a waiver of claim to a fortune they didn't even know existed. Tessa had called the notary to speed things up. She wanted to rush toward her future. She had no idea she had just sprinted into a cage. I started the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving them to their celebration. The fuse was lit, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one rushing to put it out. I was just going to watch it burn. I did not wait for Monday morning. I did not wait for business hours. The moment I was back in the sterile quiet of my hotel room, I scanned the documents, the family settlement and asset reconciliation agreement and the statement of digital actions were converted into high-resolution PDF files. The blue ink of Tessa's signature and the heavy black stamp of the notary looked final on the screen. I opened a new email addressed to the fraud department of the bank holding the HELOC, carbon copying the legal team at Sentinel Verify and Jade Monroe. I typed a single sentence in the body of the email. Attached. Please find the notarized admission of unauthorized access and the timeline of identity theft regarding the account in question. I pressed send and set the trap. The digital world moves faster than the human conscience. While my father and sister were likely opening a second bottle of wine, toasting to their cleverness in handling me, the servers at the bank were already processing the kill command. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the machinery of consequence had roared to life. Jade called me while I was drinking coffee. Her voice was crisp. "The bank has received the package. They have placed a total freeze on the home equity line of credit. The remaining funds, about $80,000 that Tessa had not yet transferred to her business account, are locked. The investigation has been upgraded from suspicious activity to confirmed internal fraud, based on the affidavit you sent." "And the money she already moved?" I asked. "Clawed back," Jade said. "The bank has issued a recall notice to the receiving institution because we have proof that the initial transfer was fraudulent. They can reverse the wire. It might take 48 hours, but that money is gone. The first domino hit the second one before noon. Tessa had already signed a lease for her design studio. She had put down a deposit, but the substantial renovation costs were scheduled to be paid in installments starting today. I knew this because I had seen the contractor agreements in her email trash folder. When the bank froze her accounts to investigate the incoming clawback, the check she had written to the general contractor bounced. I could imagine the scene. The contractor, a man who likely did not have time for games, standing in the middle of the half-painted studio, calling his crew to pack up, the landlord receiving a notification that the automatic withdrawal for the rent had failed due to insufficient funds or frozen status. My phone remained silent, but the silence was heavy. It was the deep breath before the scream. I continued my work. I logged into the Federal Identity Theft Portal. Usually, these reports take months to process because it is one person's word against another's. But I had a notarized confession. I uploaded the document where Tessa admitted to accessing my accounts. I uploaded the timeline. I clicked submit. The system flagged it for immediate review, by law. Once a confirmed identity theft report is filed with this level of evidence, credit bureaus must strip the fraudulent debt from the victim's record within 4 days. I was scrubbing my name clean. At the same time, I was staining theirs with permanent ink. At 1:30 in the afternoon, my phone finally rang. It was Gordon. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sit in the panic for just a few extra seconds. Then I picked up. Riley? His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, lecture-heavy baritone was gone. In its place was a thin, trembling sound. It was the voice of a man who had looked at a map and realized he was standing on a landmine. "Riley, are you there?" "I am here. Dad," I said. I kept my voice perfectly even. "The bank just called," he stammered. "They said the HELOC is frozen. They said there is a fraud investigation. They mentioned a document, a sworn affidavit." He stopped. I could hear him breathing hard. He was waiting for me to explain. He was waiting for me to say it was a mistake. "Yes," I said. "I sent it to them last night." "But," he sounded like he was choking on the air. "But we signed the reconciliation. You said that was to fix it. You said that would stop the alerts." "I said I wanted everything to be clear," I corrected him. "And I said I wanted to sign the papers to make the alerts stop bothering me, which they have. The bank is no longer alerting me to suspicious activity because they now have confirmed proof of the activity." "Riley, what are you doing?" The fear in his voice spiked. "Tessa is at the bank right now. She is hysterical. They are threatening to call the police if she does not leave. You have to tell them it is okay. You have to call them and say you authorized it." "I cannot do that." "Dad," I said, "that would be lying to a federal institution. I am just following procedure. You taught me that rules are important." "This is your sister," he shouted, the old anger trying to break through the fear but failing. "You are destroying her." "She signed the admission. Dad, you witnessed it. You verified that she took the actions she took. I am just filing the paperwork you both gave me." I hung up. I did not block the number. I wanted to see the call log grow. Every missed call was another piece of evidence of their harassment. Then the texts from Tessa began. "Pick up the phone. Riley, please pick up. The contractor just walked out. They are taking the paint back. How could you do this? We had a deal. I am going to sue you. I swear I'm going to sue you for entrapment. Dad is crying. Are you happy?" Dad is literally crying in the kitchen. "I am sorry, okay? I am sorry. Just call the bank and tell them to release the funds. I will pay you back double. Please." I watched the messages scroll down my screen like credits on a movie that had ended badly. She cycled through every stage of grief in 10 minutes. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression. I did not reply to a single one. Silence is a vacuum. The more I stayed silent, the more she filled the space with incriminating rants. Then, a notification from Jade popped up. "Come to my office. Now. We found something." I drove to the glass tower. The city blurring past me. I felt light, almost weightless. The burden of being the fixer was gone. I was no longer holding up the sky for people who threw rocks at me. When I walked into Jade's office, she was not sitting behind her desk. She was standing by the window, holding a thick, yellowed file folder. "I was doing a deep dive on your family's asset structure," Jade said, turning to face me. "Standard procedure to see if they had any hidden liquidity we could go after if they tried to fight the settlement. I pulled the probate records from your Aunt June's estate." "June?" I frowned. "That was settled 3 years ago. She left me the car and the small savings account. Gordon got the house, which he sold immediately." "She left a trust," Jade said. "A dormant trust. It was set to vest when Tessa turned 35, or upon certain family milestones. It is not huge, maybe $50,000, but it was meant to be a final safety net for your sister." Jade opened the file. Her finger traced a paragraph on the 3rd page. "But look at this clause. June wrote this herself. It is not standard boilerplate." I leaned in. The text was typed on a typewriter, the ink slightly faded. Section 9C, the Integrity Clause. "In the event that any beneficiary is found to have committed an act of financial dishonesty, fraud, or theft against another family member, their portion of this trust shall be immediately forfeited and redistributed to the aggrieved party. Proof of such dishonesty need not be a criminal conviction, but may be a notarized admission or a civil judgment." I stared at the words. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Aunt June had known. She hadn't just left me money. She had left me a weapon, buried in the ground like a landmine, waiting for the exact moment my family showed their true colors. She knew Gordon's greed. She knew Tessa's entitlement. She knew that one day they would come for me. "Your sister just turned 34, Jade said softly. "This money would have been hers next year. It would have saved her studio. But because she signed that affidavit yesterday to save her skin in the short term, she triggered this clause. She disinherited herself," I whispered. "And she does not even know it yet," Jade added. "The trustee will be notified of the fraud filing. The money now comes to you." I sat down in the leather chair. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel the rush of victory. I felt a profound, aching sadness. My aunt had loved us, but she had seen us clearly. She had looked at her brother and her nieces and realized that one was a giver and 2 were takers. She had built a mechanism to protect the giver, even from the grave. "Do you want to tell them?" Jade asked. I looked at the file. I looked at my phone, which was still vibrating with Tessa's threats. "No," I said. "Not yet. Let them focus on the studio. Let them think this is just about the loan." I stood up. They wanted to play games with inheritance. They wanted to talk about what they were owed. Aunt June just answered them. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Tessa was screaming at a bank teller, and Gordon was trying to figure out how to spin this into a story where he was the victim. But the story had already been written 3 years ago, by a woman who smoked Virginia Slims and drove a beat-up Mustang. "Thank you, June," I said to the glass. The machine was running now. The gears were grinding, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one stuck in the mechanism. I was the one holding the off switch, and I had no intention of pressing it. When the legal wall slammed down, Tessa did what she always did when reality refused to bend to her will. She went online. My phone started vibrating at 6 o'clock in the evening. It wasn't a call. It was a relentless, buzzing seizure of notifications. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the unholy trinity of modern public shaming. I opened Instagram. There it was. A photo of me from 10 years ago. An unflattering candid taken at a barbecue where I looked sweaty and awkward, contrasted with a perfectly filtered selfie of Tessa wiping away a single. Artfully placed tear. The caption read, "It is hard when you realize the people you would take a bullet for are the ones holding the gun." My own sister came home and decided to destroy my dreams just because she could. I am heartbroken. The studio opening is postponed indefinitely due to family malice. Please pray for my dad. He is devastated. She didn't tag me directly. That would be too aggressive. She just left breadcrumbs big enough for the wolves to follow. Immediately. The comments section filled with the predictable chorus of flying monkeys. People we went to high school with, distant cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, and random followers who lived for the drama. Oh my God. I am so sorry. Babe, jealousy is a disease. Get well soon to your sister. Family should support family. This is disgusting. Then came the direct messages to me. Riley, what is going on? Riley, why are you doing this to Tessa? Riley, call your dad. I sat in the hotel chair, watching the screen. The old Riley would have been typing furiously. I would have been drafting a counterpost, explaining about the lock, the stolen money, the forged signature. I would have been desperate to correct the record, to plead my case to the court of public opinion. I would have given Tessa exactly what she wanted. A fight. She wanted a screaming match in the comments so she could play the victim of my aggression. Instead, I took a screenshot. I opened my email and sent the image to Jade. Subject line, defamation/violated NDA potential. Jade replied 4 minutes later. On it, do not engage, do not post, do not even view her stories. I am sending a formal notice to her counsel, or whatever strip mall lawyer she hires, that all communication must go through my office. If she continues to discuss pending litigation publicly, we will add a slander count to the civil suit. I put my phone down and ordered room service, a club sandwich and fries. I ate slowly, savoring the silence. Tessa was waiting for the explosion. She was refreshing her feed, waiting for my angry comment so she could reply with something like, I forgive you, even though you hurt me. When 10 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour, and I remained silent, the narrative began to wobble. Her commenters ran out of things to say, without a villain to fight back. The victim act started to look like a monologue performed in an empty theater. At 8 o'clock, Gordon called. I answered on the second ring. How can you let people say those things about your sister? He demanded. His voice was thick with the distinct slur of Scotch. People are talking. Riley, the neighbors are asking questions. I am not saying anything. Dad, I said, calmly and in a low voice. You are humiliating us, he shouted. After everything I did, I raised you. I put a roof over your head. I paid for your braces. And this is how you repay me? By freezing your sister's accounts? By treating us like criminals? I am not treating you like criminals, I said. I am treating you like witnesses. What? You signed the witness statement, Dad. You put your name next to hers on the document that confirmed she accessed the accounts without authorization. You validated the timeline. If I am treating you like anything, I am treating you like a man who stands by his signature. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end. He had forgotten, or maybe he had chosen to forget. He thought his signature was just a formality to get me to shut up. He didn't realize it was a binding legal act that stripped him of the right to play the outraged father. You trapped me, he whispered. No, I said. I just handed you a pen. You chose to write. I hung up. By the next morning, the cracks in Tessa's story were turning into canyons. A small investor named Mr. Lewis, a local dentist, who had put $10,000 into Tessa's studio in exchange for a percentage of future profits, had apparently seen the post, but unlike the high school friends who sent thoughts and prayers, Mr. Lewis cared about his return on investment. He had called the property management company to ask why the opening was postponed. The property manager, who had received the clawback notice from the bank, likely told him the truth. The funds are under investigation for fraud. Mr. Lewis didn't post on Instagram. He withdrew his capital. I knew this because Tessa posted again at noon. This time, there was no filter. Some people are so toxic they poison everything around them. Thanks to the lies being spread, we lost a partner. Karma is real. She was right. Karma was real. She just had the direction of the flow confused. Then came the wildest card in the deck, Evan Mercer. Evan was Tessa's fiancé. He was a man who wore loafers without socks and talked loudly about cryptocurrency at parties. He liked Tessa because she was decorative. And she liked him because he looked good in a wedding photo. Their relationship was built on a foundation of mutual vanity. He called me at 2 in the afternoon. "Hey, Riley," he said. His voice was tight, high-pitched. "Listen, this is awkward, but Tessa is saying some crazy stuff about the bank and the FBI, and I need to know." "Know what, Evan? My name isn't on any of that stuff, right? Like the studio lease? Or the loan she took out? Because we are getting married in 6 months, and my broker said if she has a fraud flag, it could blow up my mortgage application for the new house." I almost laughed. He wasn't calling to defend her honor. He wasn't calling to mediate peace. He was calling to make sure the blast radius didn't hit his credit score. "I cannot discuss the specifics of the investigation, Evan," I said, channeling my inner Jade. "But the affidavit she signed admits to sole responsibility for the unauthorized access. However, if you co-signed any other loans with her during that period, the bank might audit those too, just to be safe." I heard a sharp inhale. "She told me the money came from you. She said you gave it to her as a wedding gift." "I did not," I said. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I have to go." The line went dead. An hour later, Tessa's Instagram stories became a chaotic stream of consciousness. She wasn't talking about me anymore. She was vague posting about loyalty. Funny how men run when things get tough. A real man stands by his woman no matter what the haters say. She was turning on Evan. It was fascinating to watch. Tessa needed a scapegoat. She needed someone to blame for the fact that her life was collapsing. First it was me, but I wasn't reacting. I was a wall. You cannot fight a wall. You just break your hand punching it. So she turned on the bank. But the bank was a faceless institution. So she turned on Evan. She was devouring her own support system because she didn't have the emotional maturity to sit in her own failure. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room, my laptop open. I wasn't looking at social media anymore. I was looking at a spreadsheet. Item: HELOC funds. Status: recovered. Item: identity theft report. Status: filed. Item: Aunt June's trust. Status: pending trustee review. I looked at the list. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't a tragedy. It was just an invoice. For 30 years, I had paid with my time, my energy, and my money to keep the Hall family facade from crumbling. I had paid for their mistakes. I had paid for their pride. Now, I was finally sending them the bill. Tessa could scream to her 5,000 followers. She could paint me as the villain. She could burn her relationship with Evan and alienate her investors. It didn't matter. The truth is not a popularity contest. The truth is a ledger. And for the first time in the history of our family, the math was finally balancing out. I closed the laptop. I had a meeting with the Sentinel Verify buyers in 2 days. I needed a haircut. I needed a new suit. I needed to look like a woman who was about to become a multimillionaire, not a woman whose sister was having a meltdown on the internet. I stood up and walked to the door. I was done watching the show. The legal challenge arrived on Tuesday morning in the form of a cease and desist letter on cheap bond paper. Tessa had hired a lawyer. His name was Marcus Dean, and a quick Google search revealed his office was located in a strip mall between a vape shop and a dry cleaner. The letter was aggressive, filled with exclamation points that had no place in legal correspondence. It claimed that the family settlement and asset reconciliation agreement was void because Tessa had signed it under extreme emotional duress and psychological manipulation. It demanded the immediate unfreezing of the assets and a retraction of the fraud report to the bank. I sat in Jade Monroe's conference room, sliding the letter across the glass table. Jade picked it up, read the first paragraph, and actually laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "Duress," Jade said, dropping the paper. "She claims she was forced. Interesting strategy for someone who texted you 3 times begging for the meeting." Jade opened her laptop and connected it to the large screen on the wall. She pulled up the evidence file we had compiled. "Here is Exhibit A," Jade said, pointing to the projected image of the text logs. Time-stamped messages from Tessa. "Oh, thank God. I knew you would understand. When can we meet? Does that sound like a hostage? Riley? No, I said. It sounds like an accomplice. And Exhibit B, Jade continued, swiping to the next image. The notary logbook. Mr. Henderson noted in his ledger that the appointment was booked by Tessa Hall at 1:15 in the afternoon. She brought the notary. She brought the stamp. You cannot claim you were ambushed by an executioner you hired yourself. Jade drafted a response while I watched. It was not a letter. It was a demolition. She attached the text history, the notary receipt, and a high-resolution scan of the agreement where Tessa's signature was bold and steady. Her cover letter was one sentence long. We welcome the opportunity to present this evidence of your client's premeditated intent to a judge. We never heard from Marcus Dean again. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small, windowless room at the main branch of the bank. The air conditioning was set to freezing. Across from me sat 2 fraud investigators, a man and a woman who looked like they had not smiled since the 2008 financial crisis. A digital recorder sat on the table between us, its red light blinking a steady, unblinking eye. Ms. Hall, the woman began, looking at a file thick with my financial history, regarding the home equity line of credit application dated September 15th. Did you authorize this transaction? No, I said. Did you receive any of the funds disbursed to the account ending in 449? No. Do you recognize the signature on the deed of trust used as collateral? It is a simulation of my signature, I said, keeping my voice flat. But it is not mine. The loop on the capital R is inconsistent with my handwriting sample on file from when I opened my accounts 10 years ago. The man leaned forward. Your sister, Tessa Hall, claims in a separate statement that she had your verbal permission to manage your assets while you were in Seattle. She claims this was a misunderstanding of the scope of that permission. This was their pivot. They couldn't deny the forgery, so they were trying to reframe it as a communication error. I looked directly at the recorder. I granted limited power of attorney for mail retrieval and basic maintenance. That document is notarized and on file. It explicitly excludes real estate transactions and credit extensions. There is no such thing as verbal permission that overrides a written legal exclusion. The investigators exchanged a look. I was not playing the role of the aggrieved sister. I was playing the role of a compliance officer. I was speaking their language. Thank you. Ms. Hall, the woman said, closing the folder. We have enough to maintain the freeze and proceed with the reclamation of funds. I walked out of the bank and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. My phone buzzed. It was Gordon. He had stopped shouting. Now, he was trying a different frequency. Riley, he said, his voice cracking with a performance of paternal disappointment. I do not understand why you are being so rigid. I thought we were fixing this. I signed that paper because I thought it was a way to help Tessa, not to trap her. I am an old man. I did not read the fine print. You used my trust against me. You did not read the fine print, I repeated. But you read the title, Dad, Statement of Unauthorized Access. It was in bold, 18-point font at the top of the page. You watched Tessa sign it. You watched the notary stamp it. You cannot claim you were tricked into witnessing a confession unless you are admitting you are incompetent. I am your father, he snapped, the mask slipping. I raised you. I put food on your table. And now you are a witness in a federal fraud investigation, I said. If Tessa goes to court to fight the bank, they will subpoena you. They will put you on a stand and ask you if you saw her sign that paper. If you lie under oath to protect her, you commit perjury. If you tell the truth, you sink her. That is the reality. Dad, there is no third option where we all go out for ice cream. I hung up. He didn't call back. The story was leaking out now. The misunderstanding narrative Tessa was trying to spin on social media was hitting a logical wall. She posted a long, rambling video on TikTok, crying about how I had trapped her into signing papers she didn't understand, claiming I had told her verbally that she could use the house money. She said I could, Tessa sobbed into the camera. She told me before she left for Seattle that I could use the equity to get the business started because she wanted to be a silent partner. She is lying. The video got thousands of views. People were confused. Why would Riley lie? Maybe it really was a verbal deal. I did not record a response video. I did not issue a press release. I posted one single image to my own, private social media account, which was visible only to our mutual friends and family. It was a photo of the new, black smart lock on my condo door. The caption was a single question. If I gave you permission to use my house, why did you have to change the locks to get inside? The effect was instantaneous. The comment section on Tessa's video stopped moving. The Team Tessa hashtags vanished. The logic was simple, brutal, and impossible to refute. You do not break into a house you have been invited into. You do not change the keys to a kingdom you were given. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a lie dying in public. That evening, I was walking back to my hotel when a sleek gray Audi pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Evan Mercer. He looked tired. The crisp confidence he usually wore like cologne was gone. He looked like a man who was watching his future dissolve. "Riley," he said, leaning across the passenger seat. "Can we talk? Just for a minute? Off the record?" I stopped but didn't approach the car. "I have nothing to say to you." "Evan, look," he said, opening the door and stepping out. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I know Tessa messed up. I know she went too far. But this investigation, it is going to ruin us. I have investors looking at my portfolio. If my name gets dragged into a fraud case, I am finished." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I can get her to drop the lawyer. I can get her to apologize publicly. Just tell the bank it was a mistake. Tell them you authorized it retroactively. I will write you a check right now for the renovation costs. We can settle this inside the family." He was trying to buy me. He thought this was about money. He thought I was throwing a tantrum that could be soothed with a check. I looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a cold assessment of his value. "You think this is about the renovation costs?" I asked. "What else is it about?" he asked, blinking. "It is about money, right?" I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a gun or a subpoena. I pulled out a small, cream-colored business card. "Jade Monroe," I said, handing it to him. "She handles all my communications regarding this matter. If you want to offer a settlement, send it to her in writing. But I should warn you, Evan, if you write a check to cover a fraud you claim you didn't know about, a prosecutor might call that an admission of complicity." Evan froze. His hand hovered over the card. He realized then that he wasn't negotiating with a scorned sister-in-law. He was negotiating with a witness. He took the card, got back in his car, and drove away without another word. I watched his taillights fade. They were all scrambling now. They were trying to patch the holes in the hull of their ship, but the water was coming in too fast. I went up to my room and opened my secure email. A message from the Sentinel Verify board was waiting for me. Subject: Closing schedule finalization. Body: The acquisition is set to close on Friday. The wire transfer of your equity payout, totaling $12,400,000, will be initiated upon signature. $12 million. My family was fighting over a $150,000 loan. They were destroying their reputations and their relationships for a fraction of what was coming. If they had just been honest, if they had just waited, if they had treated me like a person instead of a resource, I would have shared it. I would have funded Tessa's studio. I would have paid off Gordon's mortgage. I would have lifted us all up. But they couldn't wait. They had to steal the copper wiring from the walls because they didn't know the house was made of gold. I printed the email. I put it in the folder next to the general release and waiver they had signed. They had signed away their claim to my future to avoid prosecution for stealing my past. "Friday," I whispered. "On Friday, the money would hit my account, and on Friday, the world would know exactly how much they had lost. I wasn't just going to be rich, I was going to be untouchable, and they were going to be the people who sold a winning lottery ticket for the price of a used car." The week leading up to the acquisition of Sentinel Verify felt less like a business transaction and more like the final seconds of a bomb defusal operation. The air in my hotel room was thick with the hum of servers and the smell of stale coffee. I had 3 monitors set up on the desk, each tracking a different timeline that was racing toward a collision. On the left monitor was the Seattle timeline. The buyers had sent the final closing documents. The wire transfer for $12,400,000 was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 o'clock. It was a life-altering sum. The kind of money that buys freedom, silence, and a fortress where no one can ever change your locks again. On the right monitor was the Cincinnati timeline. This was the messy, bleeding edge of my family drama. My father and sister had developed a sudden, terrifying instinct. They were like predators sensing a shift in the wind. They did not know about the merger specifically, but they knew something was happening. Perhaps it was the way I walked, or the expensive lawyers I had hired, or maybe just the smell of money drifting across state lines. Gordon called me on Wednesday evening. "Riley, sweetheart," he said. The endearment slid out of the phone like oil. He hadn't called me sweetheart since I was 6 years old. "I was thinking, we should have a family dinner. Just the 3 of us. Like old times. I found that old photo album from when we went to the lake house. You were so cute in your little swim goggles." The sudden nostalgia was nauseating. Gordon Hall did not reminisce unless he was selling something. "I am busy with work, Dad," I said, typing a response to a due diligence query on the center screen. "What kind of work?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound casual. "Tessa said you have been on conference calls all night. Is it big? Are you getting a promotion?" "It is just a project closeout," I said. "Standard audits. You know," he continued, ignoring my deflection. "I always said you were the smart one, the earner. I told Tessa yesterday. I said, Riley is going to take care of us. She is the rock." I closed my eyes. The rock. That was code for the wallet. He was positioning himself. He was rewriting history to make himself the supportive patriarch, so that when the money appeared, he could claim he had been cheering for me all along. Tessa was less subtle. She texted me an hour later. "So, Seattle? That is a big tech hub. Did you meet someone? Or maybe you invented something? I saw you wearing that blazer yesterday. That is silk, right? Like real silk?" She was pricing me. She was looking at my clothes, my demeanor, my lawyers, and calculating the net worth. She was terrified about the fraud investigation. Yes, but greed is a stronger drug than fear. She thought if she could just get close enough to the source of the funds, she could wash away her crimes with my checkbook. I did not reply. I let them wonder. On Thursday morning, the legal ground shifted. Jade Monroe called me at 7 o'clock. "Tessa tried to file an emergency injunction," she said. "Her lawyer, some new guy she found who clearly charges by the hour, filed a motion to stay the fraud investigation and unfreeze the assets based on pending family mediation. Can she do that?" I asked, feeling a spike of adrenaline. "She can try," Jade said, her voice sounding like a steel trap snapping shut. "But she made a fatal error. She attached the family settlement and asset reconciliation agreement as proof that there was a mediation in progress. The agreement she signed admitting to the fraud?" "Exactly," Jade said. "She thought the title of the document would fool the judge. She thought the judge would see reconciliation and think, oh, they are working it out. But the bank's legal team saw the document and immediately flagged the fraud admission in paragraph 2. The bank did not see a family dispute. They saw a confession. Instead of granting the injunction, the judge dismissed the motion with prejudice and forwarded the file to the district attorney's office for review. Tessa had walked into a courtroom to ask for a pause and had essentially handed the prosecutor a signed confession. "And there is more," Jade said, "because she tried to use the court system to enforce a fraudulent agreement. She just triggered the bad faith clause in the original Sentinel Verify non-disclosure agreement I had you sign with your family years ago. Remember that?" I paused. I had forgotten. 5 years ago, when I first started the company, I made everyone sign a basic privacy agreement so they wouldn't talk about my work. "It means," Jade said, savoring the words. That even if she somehow wiggles out of the bank fraud, she is now in breach of contract with me. We have her from both sides. But I wasn't satisfied. I needed total control. I hung up with Jade and called the regional bank that held the mortgage on my rental property at 1014 Maplewood Drive. This was the house Tessa had tried to use as collateral for the HELOC. The HELOC was frozen, but the original mortgage was still there. A small, 30-year fixed loan I had taken out years ago. "This is Riley Hall," I told the loan officer. "I would like to purchase the promissory note on my property." "Excuse me?" the officer asked. "You want to pay off the mortgage?" "No," I said. "I want to buy the debt. I want to buy the note itself from your portfolio. I am willing to pay a premium of 5% above the current principal balance for the assignment of the deed of trust." It was an unusual move, but perfectly legal. By buying the note, I would become my own lender. But more importantly, I would become the primary lien holder on the property. Why? Because Tessa's name was on the utility bills for that house. She had used those bills to establish residency for her fraudulent business license. By owning the note, I became the entity that controlled the property's title. If she tried to claim any tenancy rights or use the address for any more scams, I could foreclose on the property, and by extension, her business address. Within 30 days, I wired the funds, $112,000. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I owned the debt. I held the keys, the deed, and the loan. I had wrapped the house in so much legal barbed wire that if Tessa even looked at it, she would bleed. Friday morning arrived with a gray, heavy sky. I stood by the window of my hotel room, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. My phone was on the desk. It was vibrating. Dad, 3 missed calls. Tessa, 5 missed calls. Evan Mercer, 1 text. They knew. Somehow, the energy had shifted. Maybe a Google alert for Sentinel Verify had finally popped up on Tessa's phone. Maybe the press release about the acquisition had just hit the wire. Sentinel Verify, acquired for $90 million. The headline would be flashing across business tickers right now. My name would be listed as co-founder. My payout would be public record for anyone who knew how to do the math. The vibration on the desk became a continuous, angry buzz. They were calling to congratulate me. They were calling to remind me that we were family. They were calling to ask if I remembered that time they bought me ice cream in 1998. I looked at the phone. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I picked it up and turned it over. I silenced the ringer. They thought the climax of this story was going to be a screaming match in the living room. They thought it would be a dramatic confrontation where I threw money in their faces, but they were wrong. The climax was happening in a quiet conference room in Seattle, where a wire transfer was being initiated. The climax was happening in a county clerk's office, where a deed was being recorded in my name. I picked up my briefcase. Inside was the general release and waiver they had signed on Tuesday. Clause 14, Section 3. The undersigned hereby waives any and all future claims to the assets, income, or estate of Riley Hall. They had signed it to save $200 a month. They had signed it because they thought I was broke. I walked to the door. "You wanted the small money, Tessa," I whispered to the empty room. "You got it." I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The elevator was waiting. I was going to sign the final papers. I was going to become a very rich woman. And when I came back, I would not be coming back as their daughter or their sister. I would be coming back as the landlord of their reality. Saturday night arrived with the kind of humidity that makes champagne glasses sweat. Tessa's grand opening for her design studio was in full swing. She had rented a raw industrial space in the Arts District, filled it with rented furniture, and invited everyone who had ever liked a photo of hers on social media. I parked my car across the street. I watched through the windshield. I could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tessa was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown cut short. She was laughing, throwing her head back, holding court. Gordon was standing near the bar, looking expansive and proud, shaking hands with people he definitely owed money to. Evan was there too, checking his watch. looking polished and bored. They looked like a family that had won. "Are you ready?" Jade asked from the passenger seat. She was wearing a black suit that looked like it was cut from a shadow. "Yes," I said. "Let us go in." We did not storm the gates. We walked in through the front door like potential clients. The noise of the party, the clinking glass, the low thump of house music, the chatter, died down in a ripple effect as people noticed me. They nudged each other. They whispered. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The drama. The scene. Tessa saw me. Her eyes lit up. She had been rehearsing this moment. She set her glass down and walked toward me, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic forgiveness. "Riley," she said, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "I am so glad you came. I knew you wouldn't miss this. I know we have had our differences, but family is family, right?" She opened her arms. She wanted me to shove her. She wanted me to scream. She wanted a video clip that proved I was the unstable monster she had described online. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply stepped aside. Behind me walked two men in gray suits. One was Mr. Sterling, the senior risk officer from the bank. The other was the representative for the commercial landlord who owned this building. Mr. Sterling did not look at the guests. He looked at Tessa. "Ms. Hall," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a knife. "I am afraid we have to interrupt. We have issued a freeze on all accounts associated with this lease due to a confirmed finding of identity fraud." Tessa laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound. "What? This is ridiculous. My sister is just trying to scare me. She is having a breakdown." She turned to the crowd, smiling wildly. "Sorry, everyone. Just a little sibling rivalry. Ignore them." "This is not a rivalry, Ms. Hall," Jade said, stepping forward. She placed a single document on the high-top table next to the hors d'oeuvres. It was the statement of unauthorized access. "This is a confession." The room went deadly silent. "That is your signature," Jade said, pointing to the blue ink. "Notarized 3 days ago, admitting that you accessed Riley Hall's accounts without permission and transferred funds illegally. Based on this admission, the lease for this studio is void. The deposit was paid with stolen funds. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Tessa stared at the paper. Her face went pale, her makeup suddenly looking like war paint on a losing soldier. "I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. "I just signed it to make her stop. She forced me." Gordon pushed his way through the crowd. He looked red-faced and furious. "Now see here. This is a family matter. You cannot just come in here and ruin my daughter's night. We can talk about this in private." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike and then taught me that love was conditional on my bank balance. "There is nothing to talk about, Dad," I said. "You witnessed it." Gordon froze. "You signed the witness line," I said, my voice carrying clearly to the investors standing near the back. "You verified her identity. You verified her action. You told the bank that this was true. Unless you want to tell these federal investigators that you committed perjury?" Gordon opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked around the room and saw the realization dawning on the faces of his friends. He wasn't the victim. He was the accomplice. He shrank back, his bluster evaporating instantly. Then, the movement caught my eye. Evan Mercer. He was standing near the exit, looking at his phone. He was likely checking his credit score. He looked up, met my eyes, and then looked at Tessa. Tessa saw him. "Evan," she pleaded, reaching out a hand. Tell them this is crazy." Evan took a step back. He didn't look at her with love. He looked at her like she was a contagion. "I cannot be involved in this, Tessa," he said. His voice was cold. "My firm has strict compliance rules. If there is a fraud investigation..." He reached into his pocket. He didn't make a speech. He just placed the engagement ring on the nearest table. It made a small, sharp click against the glass. "I think we are done," he said. Tessa let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She stood alone in the center of her dream studio, surrounded by people who were already backing away, checking their phones, finding excuses to leave. The stage had collapsed, but I wasn't done. I had one last thing to say. I walked over to the table where Jade had placed the document. I opened a second folder. I took out the email confirming the Sentinel Verify acquisition. "You spent so much energy trying to steal $150,000, I said quietly. Tessa looked up, her eyes blurry with tears. "You were so desperate for the scraps. I needed it," she hissed. "You have everything. You don't know what it is like." "I have everything," I agreed. As of this morning, the sale of my company closed. My share of the buyout was $12 million. A gasp went through the room. Gordon's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, the greed instantly replacing the shame. "Riley," he breathed. "$12 million? Honey, that is wonderful. We can fix this. We are family. We can pay the bank back and—" "No," I cut him off. "We can't." I tapped the document on the table. "Because in this agreement you signed to avoid being prosecuted for the theft," I said. "There is a waiver. Clause 14. You waived all rights to any future assets, income, or estate belonging to me. You signed it. Dad, you signed it. Tessa, you traded $12 million for the right to not go to jail for stealing a down payment." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. It was the sound of a fortune vanishing into thin air. Gordon looked like he was going to be sick. He slumped against the wall, his face gray. Tessa just stared at me, her mouth open, unable to comprehend the scale of what she had just lost. They had tried to pick my pocket, and in doing so, they had burned the winning lottery ticket. I looked at them one last time. I didn't feel the need to shout. I didn't feel the need to explain. The math had been done. The ledger was closed. "I am not angry," I said. The words felt light, true. "I am just finished." I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard Tessa start to scream, a raw, primal sound of regret, but I didn't look back. I walked out into the night air. It was cool and crisp. I got into my car. I drove out of the city, watching the skyline fade in the rearview mirror. I drove for 40 minutes until I reached the suburbs. I pulled into the driveway of 1014 Maplewood Drive. The house was dark. It looked small and ordinary. I got out of the car. I took a screwdriver and a new deadbolt kit from the passenger seat. I walked to the front door. It took me 10 minutes to remove the lock Tessa had installed. I stripped the screws. I pulled the mechanism out. I threw the black metal hardware into the trash can. I installed the new lock. It was solid brass, heavy, reliable. I sat down on the front step. I pulled a small battered metal box from my bag. Aunt June's box. I opened it. Inside was her old lighter, a photo of her and my mother, and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it under the light of the porch lamp. "Calm is not submission," she had written in her spidery cursive. "Calm is power. It is the eye of the storm. Let them scream. You just hold the line." I took a deep breath. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and rain. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for a crisis to fix. I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I closed the box. I stood up and locked the door. The click of the deadbolt was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I was Riley Hall, and I was finally home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support us by hitting that like button so this story can reach even more people.